Hello, everyone. It's Jamal Thomas. Welcome to the Progressive Soapbox. So, guys, we're retrying this. This is Grant Cameron, UFOologist, amazing UFOologist, actually. And deals in Grant Cameron deals with this, I guess, this interesting intersection between consciousness and the UFO phenomena itself. And phenomenal is a good idea, phenomenology, because he makes this case that all of these things are interrelated to one another. You can't necessarily pull these subjects apart and talk about one without necessarily dealing with this other aspect of consciousness. Grant, please say hi to everyone. And I would say if I missed anything in that introduction, please give your own addition to it.
Yeah, thanks, Jamaro, for having me on, and welcome to the guests that are listening. We're getting feedback to your speakers, though.
Let's see. Let me see what's going on.
Yeah, now it seems to be okay, but for whatever reason, but it's stopped now. So let's just keep going. Yeah, you've actually picked up on what I say is the most important aspect of the UFO phenomenon. That's the consciousness aspect. Most people are interested in stuff like the videos, they want to see the metal, and yet when you come right down to it, you can watch a million videos for the next 20 years. You're never going to learn what's actually going on. The key to the whole thing is, if you want to know what the UFO phenomenon is about, you have to interact with the intelligence behind the phenomena. And there's only one way you can do that, and that's through consciousness. In fact, I've even gone farther in terms of what I would say is that consciousness, if you look at quantum physics, consciousness is the basis of the universe. You do not get a physical particle until you have an observer. As soon as you have an observer, then you have in the dual slit experiment, the particle appears on the back wall. So I'm saying basically you need to make the right assumption when you start looking at reality, UFOs, and realize that consciousness is the ground of being. It is what it's all about.
Now, to explain to the audience, the reason why you say that, the double slit experiment, a physicist will send a particle through a beam, through a double slit.
Yeah.
The particle goes through the double slit, and if you observe the particle, meaning if you put some kind of sensor on one of the slits itself to figure out which slit it goes through, a particle hits the back wall, just a single particle. And it makes sense because it's a single particle and it's going through it. If you don't look at it, meaning if you don't observe, if you don't figure out which one it goes through, it gives you a wave pattern. It goes through both. Now, this is bizarre because it's a particle. It shouldn't give you both. It gives you two. The indication being it doesn't exist until you observe it. Until you actually, an observer, something puts its consciousness on it, that particular thing doesn't come into existence.
Yeah, it remains as a quantum wave until there's an observer. And then it also implies something that I have talked about, is the fact that the quantum wave, which appears on the back wall until there's an observer, as soon as there's an observer, the quantum wave knows it. So that means the quantum wave is aware of whether there's an observer or not an observer, which would mean that the quantum wave is conscious. And people say, that's not what it means. And I say, yeah, it is what it means. If it knows when there's an observer, when there's not an observer, it's aware of what's going on. The same as there's an experiment, which was the entangled particle, the non-locality experiment, where you take say a photon or electron, and you send it in the direction at the speed of light in one direction, send one in the other direction at the speed of light, and then at some point they're entangled. So then you change the spin of the one particle. The other particle instantaneously, even if it's on the other side of the universe, will change its spin to balance instantaneously. And so that, to me, also means that because you took one of the particles and you played with its buddy, it knows what you did, which means it's conscious. And people say, that's not what it means. And I say, yeah, this is what it means. Everything is conscious. And it's all like there's even a theory about this. The universe is one huge hologram, and it all like rings like a bell. So when you affect one part of the hologram, it happens all through the entire hologram instantaneously. And it may come down to the fact that there may not be any time and space. That may be illusions, which is what you get if you get close encounters in ufology. You talk to people, for example, John Lennon. If you look at John Lennon's sighting, he has it in New York. He's looking down the East River. He and May Pang, his girlfriend, are there. And John just tells a story that he sees the UFO, goes down to the UN, it turns and disappears into the distance. She describes the fact that while they're watching this object, she said everything got very strange. She said suddenly the people below them on the deck below them were always there. And she couldn't figure out why did they not come up to see what was going on, because they're yelling and screaming and trying to take pictures of this thing. And everybody in all the apartments across from them, all the condos, everybody was gone. All the lights are out. And then this idea came in her head and said, oh, they've all gone to the Hamptons. And we even asked her, we said, didn't that sound a little strange? Everybody in New York went to the Hamptons. And she said, yeah, that did sound. And that's what's called the Oz effect. And people who are very close up to an encounter, to a UFO, will describe the fact that time and space breaks down, that they no longer know where they are, how long the event takes place. You get situations where people are driving down the LA freeway where suddenly all the cars disappear and suddenly it's just them and the UFO. And it's this idea that reinforces the fact that we've made some bad assumptions about the universe. We've assumed that matter creates consciousness, which is probably wrong. We've assumed there's a linear time, which is probably wrong. We've assumed that things are separate particles floating around in time and space. That's probably wrong. And we should get the indication from experiencers who are telling us these stories. And all the ufologists, all the UFO stuff is that the intelligence behind the UFO phenomena knows how it works. So it looks like magic to us, and it's not magic. They're just following laws of the universe that we still don't understand.
Yeah, I agree. Now I used to ask this question. I'd say people completely assume that their dream states are completely separate and distinct from where they are. Meaning the apparatus. You're in a dream state. You create your world. You create the neighbor. You have a conversation with the neighbor. You get into a car. You drive somewhere. You go to a store. You look up at the sky. You see a moon. You've generated the entirety of this universe, including yourself, like your entire body and everything else is there. If you were in that dream state and somebody cut you open, you would see blood, you would probably see a heart, a liver, and everything else. You're creating all of that. You shift into another state of consciousness, what you call waking consciousness, and the same apparatus applies. And we say, well, that was completely figment of our imagination, and this one is completely real. And it's like, well, but why do you believe that the faculty will be completely different in this way? Like, it's, if consciousness creates one, I don't understand why they believe that consciousness can't necessarily create the other.
Yeah. There's actually, if you look at the research was done at Stanford University by Stephen LaBerge, where they do the experiments with lucid dreaming, which is even a deeper state, where people will describe the fact that in the lucid dream, it is more real than the real world. And they maintain this. It's more real than and you can actually talk to characters. You can make the characters change. You can do change your environment, ask questions and stuff like that. And that seems to indicate that this is a real reality. We sort of assume that our reality is real. And so if you say that lucid dreaming is more real than the real world, if that's a dream, then the real world has got to be a dream. And we just sort of assume. But the whole idea is when you look at when you talk to people, you say, so where is the vision? You're seeing a vision, you're hearing stuff, you're smelling stuff. Where is that all taking place? And they sort of think it's in their head, and it's not in their head. It's like the head is completely dark. There is no light inside in the brain. There is no sound inside the brain. It's completely quiet. And yet people sort of just make these assumptions. So when you look at the ufology thing, again, you take a look at the intelligence behind the phenomena. If you can interact with the phenomena, it actually tells you this kind of stuff. And the one example I can give you is a guy named Bashar, who's a very famous channeler, alien channeler in Los Angeles. And at one point they asked him, and he said, we come to you, because a lot of people will say to me, well, I wasn't abducted. No, I wasn't abducted, but I have them in my dreams. And so Bashar says, we come to you in your dreams because now you're in our world. And this is the whole thing. They are coming from this environment almost like they're in there, and people will describe this. Like I always say, people say it's a physical phenomenon. I'll say, no, if you actually talk to the people who are experiencing this phenomena, no, it isn't. Sometimes they're out of their body. They get pulled out of their body. Sometimes it's a gray alien, and suddenly it turns into a ball of light. And so what I say is, well, is it a gray alien, flesh and blood, or is it a ball of light? And if it's a ball of light, does it eat bacon, eggs, toast, and coffee in the morning? I mean, it's like people are making these assumptions, but when you get into this world, there's even I don't know if you follow the To the Stars Academy, this whole disclosure thing, the New York Times, all this sort of stuff. If you look at that, the guy that runs it, his name is Jim Semivan. And Jim Semivan is an experiencer. He's a former high-level CIA person, 25 years in the CIA, and he is an experiencer. He had the beings in his room in the early 1990s while I was a CIA agent. And he said, when that happened to me, my entire idea of reality was shattered. And he describes it. He says, the idea that you can measure this thing, in other words, feel it, touch it, find out how this phenomena works, he said, is laughable. How do you define something where there does not appear to be any there? This has got to do with consciousness. This has got to do with multidimensionality. And he basically says, forget about trying to measure this thing. And that has been the experience that people have found, is that the phenomena is way less physical than you think it is. Another example is if you follow Bob Bigelow, who's this big billionaire who controls all the data to the stars. He owned the Skinwalker Ranch. He bought it in about 1995, and they had all this bizarre phenomena going on at the Skinwalker Ranch in Utah. And he ended up selling the Skinwalker Ranch for one of a number of reasons. But one of the reasons was they couldn't figure out anything. They said that not only on the ranch did the phenomena know what they were doing, the phenomena knew what they were about to do, and they could not film anything. They could not record anything. The phenomena was always ahead of them, one step ahead of them. And they basically gave up and threw their hands up and said, there's nothing we can discover. Even though he had all the money, he had the top scientists in the world working there in this tiny little space, he gave up. He could not control the phenomena because it was so much less physical than you would think. You would think, oh, we should be able to measure this. So again, when you start really looking at the experiencers and when the stories they're telling, you start to realize, like, this is not as physical as people think it is. And I would always say it's going to be much more spiritual than people think it is. And people don't really like that. When you get into the out-of-body experiences and the aliens talking about reincarnation and dead people showing up on the ship and stuff like this, it gets really, really weird. And it really sort of shatters, as Jim Semivan said, if you believe these stories these people are telling, it absolutely shatters our idea of what reality is all about.
Yeah, So I started all of this from the other end of the sandbox. When I was younger, I started this from the spirit part, like the new agey part.
Yeah.
And I floated. It's like as you float away from it, you end up in this spot. And I started to get very interested in the UFO part. And I started realizing it's so similar. Like you can pick up a book where they're talking about like spirit guides, and you can pick up a book where they're talking about UFOs, and they're almost the same book. If you take out just the UFO part, if you take out the alien part, those books are fundamentally the same. It is amazing to me. Yeah. I when I was younger, I was telling I did a thing the other day. I was telling my experience. I was like, Grant Cameron is going to be here. Here's some of the experiences that brought me to this particular point of being very interested in this subject. My experience started off with guides, where I didn't believe this stuff existed. I tried it. Meaning, look, my rule is always, if it's real, try the people at their own, if they're saying that this is what takes place, meaning this is what they did in order to get to this point, try it. So when I heard this thing of guides, I said, let's try it. Let's do the meditations. Let's do all of this stuff. Let's see if it works. And I realized I hit a fear hurdle. Like I was terrified. Like I would get to this point where it felt like I was being plugged into an electrical outlet, and I would stop. I was like, all right, I'm done. And finally, I think it was one point where I'm in bed, I'm awake, and I said, screw it, just let it happen. And I feel something in the room, and I say hello, and I hear something say hello back to me. Now, at this point, I'm on cloud nine. I'm panicking. I'm actually excited. And I break the state. I call my mom, explaining. I say, hey, you never believe what just took place. I've heard something. I made contact. The very next night, I see I'm out of body. There's a woman talking to me. And she's having a very long conversation. And she says, my name is so-and-so. I'm your expositor. And it goes through this entire process of interaction. Now, I had never heard the word expositor before. Otherwise, I probably would have discounted the entire experience. And it even gets to the point where there's this energy merger where she merges herself into mine with this amazing, elated feeling about it. Before the state breaks, you still have more conversation. Now, at this point, I go through these states of lucid dreaming for the next 2 years, where it's happening, and other bunch of weird phenomena for the next 2 years. Before this point, I was telling the audience, I used to have these weird phenomena where something would come into the room when I was 8 years old. I would feel it tug on the bed, or I would feel it sit on the bed. Nothing was weird, nothing weird beyond that point. Like nothing ever happened. But like just bizarre phenomena. So my reasoning for being interested in this stuff kind of happens just from this kind of pivot point going from then. When I finally got to the UFO part, I started looking into remote viewing. I started looking at out of body experiences. Again, if it's real, I should be able to do it. And finally getting to the UFO part. And I said, the stuff that these people are talking about for the UFO part lines up amazingly well with the stuff people talk about when they're talking about out of body experiences, when they're talking about spirit phenomena, spirit guides. Because I realized I have no idea what she is. You can put it through that lens or framework of spirit, but we have even no idea what that is. Like it's like we have these words without necessarily the meanings for the words. I agree with you on this. Like I don't think you could separate the UFO part from the consciousness part or the phenomena part, the phenomenology part. It seems that they're all related. Whatever they know something about consciousness that we are fundamentally missing.
Yeah, and if you look at the evidence, you can even take. I'll give you two examples. Ron Pandolfi is the guy at the CIA who's in charge of what's called the Weird Desk, and this is not just UFOs. It's remote viewing. It's psychokinesis. It's all these bizarre phenomena. And he interacted with a UFO researcher who is sort of his spokesman now in 1991. And the first thing he said to him is, "We have a phenomenology problem." And so the idea is that it's all the same thing. I have a publishing company where I publish people's stories on, their bizarre experiences, whatever. And my publishing company is called It's All Connected. And that's the whole thing. It's all connected. It's all one thing. 56% of all people on board the ship are talked to about oneness and love. And those are the two key things in the universe. It's the basis is love, and it's all connected. If you have people who have psychedelic experiences, the first thing they'll say is, "Oh my God, my ego was crushed and I suddenly realized everything is alive and connected." And so you take a look at the CIA. What the CIA says is that because we cannot measure and control the phenomena, we watch who the phenomena interacts with. And one of the people that is part of this, his name is Ray Hernandez. I have this download experience. Otherwise, I would never have been into consciousness. I had this download experience in 2012 where this idea came into my head that this is consciousness. You've been looking for this answer for 3 decades. This is the answer you're looking for. It's non-local consciousness. That's the basis of the whole thing. I got dragged into it. A week later, there's a guy named Ray Hernandez who started an organization called FREE, the Foundation for Research into Extraterrestrial and Experiences and Extraordinary Experiences. And he has an experience with his dog getting healed. And then he has a second experience where he's on the LA freeway. He goes to watch me do a lecture on consciousness in Florida. A couple of days later, he's on the freeway in Miami. And he's sitting there, and all of a sudden, boom! He's sort of out of his body. He's in this experience, and the beings are showing him a wheel, like a big sort of a roulette wheel spinning around. And on the wheel, it has all the things, all the spokes of the wheel. And one is remote viewing, one is quantum physics, one is consciousness, one is psychokinesis, one is UFOs and stuff. And he realizes it's all the same thing. And he makes the point, which is true, that what we try to do is we try to parse it. For example, I'll tell people who are a lot of people who have had experiences like you, will have not just UFO experiences, they'll have all these bizarre experiences, seeing the future and stuff. And I would talk to people who are abductee type experiencers. And I would say, "Oh, I'm working with these channelers." And they say, "Oh, don't put me in with the channelers. I'm not a channeler. They're all frauds." And I'm saying, no, it's all the same thing. It's just you're using a different method to tap into this thing. Same as mediums. Most mediums have had childhood abuse issues. And so what you're doing is you're what we call able to dissociate. So if you're a young girl and you're being sort of abused or whatever, you are sort of able to cut off the world. You shut off the world, and all of a sudden, boop, you're talking to your dead grandmother. You popped into the other world. And so I even wrote a book. It's called Inspired, the Paranormal World of Creativity. And in that book, I look at all the different phenomena. I look at, as you pointed out, I look at psychedelics. I look at artists. I look at musicians. I look at Nobel. I got 12 Nobel Prizes where people they pop into the other world. They bring back a Nobel Prize. And it's all the same thing. In fact, you even get, if you've seen the work that was done by Strassman, who did the work on DMT, the very powerful psychedelic DMT, he's doing this experiment in New Mexico, and he has all these subjects, And all of a sudden, they all start telling about this abduction experience. They're in the part of their experience. They got these aliens, and it's like an abduction. They're on a table and stuff. And then they would come out of the experience, and he'd go to them, and he kept it quiet for many years. He'd go, do you think you've ever been abducted? And they go, no, I don't think so. And he kept it quiet because he didn't want to let everybody know that half of the people that had gone through the experience had the abduction experience. And so you have this thing. I mean, it's all connected. That's why the CIA has basically said it's phenomenology. It's all the same thing. And if you try to parse it, then you get into this problem. It's all the same thing. And it's the ability to dissociate, to pop into that world. And the way I describe it is you have right brain, left brain. Plus, you have 1,000 modules inside your brain, the hearing center and the balance center. And all these modules are all working as one together. If they don't work together, you're in trouble. They all work together, and what it is the ability to shut down. So when you're doing a sort of a meditation thing where you're trying to link into your spirit guide or whatever, what you're doing is you're shutting down the left rational analytical part of your brain. That's what's blocking it. That's what a medium is able to do, is shut down that day. Same thing as remote viewing. They asked McMonagle, what's the key to remote viewing? He said, you got to shut down the ego. You got to shut this down. Once you can shut down the voice inside your head, whether it's meditation, psychedelics, whatever you're using, you can shut that down, and your right brain is in contact with the rest of the universe. It's the one that's associated. You need your left brain, the physical, rational, analytical brain, to keep you in the physical world. But the world is this multidimensional world that the right brain can tap into if you can shut down the left brain.
Yeah, the remote viewing is kind of like that. When I was trying that part I think I did it for like a year. That's the part. So you could, it's so bizarre. You get a number, you're writing down the number, and you're thinking to yourself, and you're not even really thinking to yourself. It's almost like you're waiting for stuff to kind of just come in. Your left brain in this is the pain in the assness. Like your conscious mind is a problem. And so you would get a bit of information. Let's say you would get something like, okay, this tastes like metal. And it says, probably a ship. And it's like, shut up.
Exactly. Yeah.
It adds it in. It tries to figure it out what it is, even though it has no information about what it is at all. And it's like the entirety of the experience. You're trying to ignore that part and just focus in on these little subtle influences that you kind of write down. The moment that you get an idea of what it is, your left brain comes in and starts adding details about what it thinks it is. It's probably somebody who's going to the store to pick up. He's like, God damn it, I'm off. Let me do the next one. Yeah.
And that's what they train in the remote viewing. That's what they say. Just record what you smell, what you taste, what you feel. Don't try to guess, because as soon as you guess, you allow the left brain to take back over, and then you're finished. Because the left brain is like, oh, it's the pyramid, it's the Cheops, it's like, and it's starting to guess this stuff, and it takes over the whole thing, and you're it's game over. So that's why they say don't guess. You just experience what it is, and later on they put all this stuff together. And I know I even when I had done this, I thought, oh, I've discovered this left right brain thing, and I go, man, this is cool. So I actually contacted Hal Puthoff, who was one of the two guys that ran the CIA program, and I said, did you ever look at the right brain left brain? And he said, read chapter 6 of my book. And his book on remote viewing, chapter 6 is right brain, left brain. Exactly. They discovered this in the 1970s. But when I discovered it, I thought I discovered the world. I thought, holy cow, I figured this thing out, because that is the key to the whole thing, is this idea that people think they have one brain, and they don't realize you have multiple brains. You have all these different things, and they're all working together. Almost like people don't realize that you have 100 trillion cells in your body, and they're all working together as one. They're all doing what they're supposed to do. They're replacing each other. They're dying, and new cells are coming in, and it's all working as one unit. And people think, they just sort of assume this happens, or they assume, like a simple thing in biology, like a cell divides, and they say, oh, the cell's dividing. And so what I say in science is, well, all you're doing is describing. You're not explaining anything. You're describing what's happened. If you realize a cell, the simplest thing in biology, a cell dividing, there are 100 trillion atoms in a cell. So this cell is this little tiny cell. It, in 16 hours, will have to source 100 trillion atoms. It'll have to take them all, put them in the right spot at the right time, put life into it, and create the second cell. And we say, oh, it just divided. Well, let's see you take 100 trillion atoms and put them together and make a cell. We just sort of assume so much stuff in the world, and we're just basically describing what's going on, and that the universe is doing all this stuff, and we just sort of take credit for it, because that's what the ego does. Oh, I figured this out. I'm so cool, and I'm the center of the universe and stuff like that. And the more you get into the ufology and the parapsychology and the spiritual aspect of the thing, you suddenly realize that this world is like billion times more complex and elaborate than you actually think it is, and it's the ability to tap in to figure it out and learn how this thing works and how to get into that and get yourself out of the way.
Yeah, you're making a distinction between description versus explanation. It's
Yeah.
like yeah, you can describe the world, you don't necessarily understand the whole thing of why. It's like,
Yeah.
yes, cell divides. That's great. Why?
Yeah,
Why?
because people sometimes they call it the naming theory. Like people will bring it up and I say, "Oh, you're just playing the naming theory," and they go, "What's that?" Well, you're giving it a name. Because you give it a name, that doesn't explain it. I mean, you can say, "Oh, it's just random. It's just placebo. It's just this." It's like, well, you're just giving it a name. You're not describing anything. And because you give it a name, that doesn't make it go away. It's still there.
Pretty much.
Or almost like describing a book. I think in the Bible, it's like, the thing of Moses. He takes his staff and he opens the Red Sea, and all the children of Israel go through, and then he closes the sea again, and then go, okay, that's really impressive, nice story. Now, how do you do the trick? I mean, it's one thing to describe what he's doing; it's another thing to do the trick.
Yeah, right, exactly. So let me ask you this: going into, why do you think, two things? Why do you think the government is not being straightforward with this? And let me ask you this: do you believe they're being straightforward? So the going to the alien thing for a while, or the UFO thing, or the UAP, I guess they've changed the name of it now. Why did they keep this a secret? And if so, should they have kept this a secret? And further the question: should they continue to keep it a secret?
I'm more sympathetic to the government and the issues that they're facing. I mean, we just take the situation where we got right now is the ego thing. Oh yeah, I know what's going on. I can explain exactly what's going on. And when you get into the government, you suddenly realize like they don't know either. That's why they said, Ron Pandolfi says, because we cannot control or measure the phenomena, we watch the people who the phenomena affects. That's all they can do. They can't take pictures like the Skinwalker Ranch. They can't control the thing. It's beyond them. It's almost like Jim Semivan. One time he was talking to a guy by John Alexander, and John believed that the government really doesn't know what's going on or whatever. So Jim Semivan said to me, he said, "Oh, this is for real. It's for real." And he said, "Okay, so who's in charge?" And Jim Semivan said, "They are." And that's the way it is. They're running the show. They're the ones that are playing the game. We're just sort of watching. That's one of the key reasons that they would be keeping it secret. And I can sympathize with that. If you're in this situation, you don't want to put the president to stand out in front of the camera and then go, I mean, he's the guy. He's the most powerful guy in the world. He knows everything. He's got everything under control. He's creating jobs. He's a super guy, and all this kind of stuff. You don't want to put him in that position. So that's one of the problems. The other problem is kind of an ugly problem. And as I said, I wrote 64 reasons. I wrote a book called Managing Magic, where I have a whole chapter called The 64 Reasons They've Decided Not to Tell You the Truth. One of the reasons is kind of a bad reason, and that is, you'll hear this with To the Stars and the Pentagon releases now. They'll say, "Oh, we got to get this for the Russians. We got to get this for the Chinese. I mean, we got to figure this out." And what they're doing is everything that happens, the only money that's around is defense money. So the defense industry has the labs, they have all the stuff. And so what are they going to create? They're going to create weapons. That's the number one thing they're going to create. Later on, they'll spin it off into the public. The same as with GPS. GPS was a military technology. Then it got spun off into the civilian world, and we got to use it. But the first thing they're going to do is build weapons with it. So when you see in the early 1950s, the Canadian government, I'm in Canada, I studied the Canadian government. The Canadian government actually went in 1950 to the Americans, and they asked the question through classified channels, what's the deal with flying saucers? And what came back from the Americans was, number one, flying saucers exist. Number two, it's the most highly classified subject in the United States. Number three, there's a small group trying to figure out what's going on. Number four, it's of tremendous significance to the Americans. And number five, there's other things that might be associated with the flying saucers, such as mental phenomena. This is 1950. They knew right from the word go that this thing, and I think it was because they recovered a live alien at Roswell, New Mexico. And the alien was talking in people's heads, and they suddenly realized, like, wow, Would we love to have this? Can you imagine? We can go over to Putin and tell him, Putin, this is God talking. We want you to do this. We want you to do that. And so they look at it like a military technology. And that's when you see the MK Ultra experiments start. And people sort of put the CIA down for the MK Ultra experiments, all the stuff they did with LSD and stuff they got with people and stuff like that. But that's what I think that's what they're trying to do. They suddenly realized that there was this consciousness aspect that if you could control it, and they're trying to figure out, how does consciousness work? How can we control it? Can we use hypnosis? Can we use LSD? Can we control people's consciousness? They realized right from the word go, they knew in 1950 that consciousness was a key element in this thing. So they're going to develop weapons with it. And that's kind of a sad aspect of the story. Yeah. But you look at it and you start to realize that these guys have a really complex situation on their hands. There's other things that, people will say, there's all these rumor stories. Oh, they're eating us in McDonald's on the backside of the moon. They're killing all the cattle. They're doing this, they're doing that. And if you suddenly say, yeah, it's for real, you run the risk of them saying, okay, what about cattle mutilations? What about abductions? Are they killing all these people? Are they abducting all these and torturing people on board the ship? And you're going, no, but nobody believes you anymore, because you lied. You actually admit that you lied. So it's almost like it's run sort of by politicians, and because you're doing the military thing, which is highly classified. The most highly classified secrets are always weapons secrets. So it's what kind of technology can we build, and they look at it and say they really don't need to know, but they need to know the story. And that's why they're leaking the story. They're basically telling us there's a live alien. They're telling us we've back engineered stuff at Area 51. They're telling us this different stuff, but they surround it with disinformation, because what they're doing is they're keeping the story going. They're keeping control of the story. They're never actually confirming the story. It's always got this sort of element of fiction, almost like when you do a movie. You take it and you fictionalize it. You change the characters, the names, the dates, whatever, and you put it out, and there goes, that sounds familiar. I mean, that sounds like the story, but you can't prove that that's the story that they're telling, because it's all been fictionalized. So I'm more sympathetic to the government now than I was before, that they have a very difficult position on their hands. And yet it really doesn't come down to the government. The government can do whatever they want to do. My thing is, I look at life all the same way. Whether Jamal or myself or whatever, you have only one thing to worry about. You came into this world, and if you believe in reincarnation, everything in the UFO world changes. Everything changes. If you're an experiencer, you chose to be an experiencer. If you're poor, you chose to be poor. If this, you chose your environment to learn certain things. And so if you have this situation, all you have to worry about is, I came into this world to do something. I came in here for a reason. I'm going to die, and there's going to be some sort of evaluation or judgment as to how did you make out. And that's apparently the question they ask you is, you planned it. How did it work out? You planned the whole thing. And so all you have to do is worry about, why am I here? And what am I supposed to be doing? Who cares what the government does? Who cares what this person does? Who cares what that person? All you have to do is worry about, what did I agree to do in this world? Meditate on it, get the answers as to what you're supposed to do, and be guided by your meditation, by your higher self, by your spirit guides or whatever, and do what you're supposed to do, and forget about everybody else, and forget about it. Because people always sort of wonder about, well, you should do this, you should change this, you should change that. And basically they're not doing anything. They're just sort of watching everybody else live their life, almost like watching a football game. You're watching somebody else live their life. It's up to me to decide. And that's why I look at, because I had this consciousness thing, I figured, like, I've got to do something with this. I mean, I got this in my head, the same as you got your stuff that came into you. They're telling you, we need you to do something. We need you to, we're awakening you. We're telling you, we're reacquainting you with the fact that you made a promise to do something. Okay, get busy. And if you open yourself up, you will get the direction, and it will send you in the direction you're supposed to go.